So let's begin with some meditation, shall we? And make yourself comfortable. The Buddha taught 3 different postures for meditation: sitting, standing, lying down. Pretty basic. Also walking. The important thing is that you can relax in whatever pose, posture that you choose, but not too relaxed. And so we feel a sense of groundedness, rootedness, like a tree. So our roots grow deeply into the earth. And then also like a tree, the tree aspires towards the sun as well. So there's this lift, but never too rigid. The strength and the stability of the tree comes from its ability to sway. And so we never want to be too rigid. We effort too much, we burn out. We effort too little, we fall asleep or become lethargic. So can we find that midpoint? And as we settle in, just begin to assess the situation here: body, heart, and mind, as well as environment. And so you might just start by scanning the body, just noticing what's here. Very important that we don't attempt to curate a particular experience, but rather approaching every moment new. So what's here in the body? And the mind, what's the condition of the mind? Again, it doesn't have to be a particular way. What's here? The momentum from the day is typically here in the mind and the body. It can take a bit for it to settle. Just be patient, loving, and kind. And feeling into the heart, condition of the heart, the space around the heart. Let's relax. And the environment. Feel the space out in front, out to the left, to the right, behind you, above and below. perhaps using the breath as a place of anchoring. Just allow what is to be. This is what meditation is. Coming to terms with the okayness of every moment. Not trying to get rid or create. Everything just as it is. for the final section of our meditation together. If you'd like, taking this in a different direction or one step further, however you like to think about it, not only being with what's here, but can we love what's here? How does the tone change when we love what's here? The subtle aversion comes to the surface. Can I love this cough, this headache, this sound? Whatever you're with. Thank you for your practice. So let's take a little break here, and we'll come back by 6:40. So preferably like 6:39 or something like that. Welcome back. Yeah. So I will make it through this, I promise. Hmm. Hmm. Just getting situated here. Okay. Okay, so tonight, I probably say this a lot, but it's one of my favorite topics, and it's really, really super vast. And when I began to kind of do my initial research, um, there was just so much. And so this might be a two-parter or a multi-parter. Um, but because today I was pretty much out of commission, it might be a little. Hopefully, it's organized well enough. But it's the story of Anguli Mala. And I really love this story, and the more I read about it and contemplate it, the more I love it. And I'll try to explain why. So there, there's many tellings of it, and I don't really know if anybody knows how much it's changed over the years. I'm sure there was somebody who was akin to Anguli Mala, but the story of Anguli Mala is pretty fantastical. But it's so beautiful and symbolic. And again, I feel like it teaches us so many things. And just how the confusion of one mind can cause so much harm. Causes harm to the mind that's confused, of course. But also there's a ripple effect that goes out. Yet at the same time, even bigger than that is this possibility for transformation. Even right in the midst of the deepest confusion. And as I reflected on this story, there's many parallels of things that happen in our lives and things that happen in this world. The human mind of the egoic mind with its greed and aversion and hatred and delusion. It creates so much internal and external stress, and that hasn't changed much over the last 2,600 years from the time of the Buddha and before. And so the teachings of the Buddha are transformative, and there's just this huge appreciation for the value and the power of these teachings to turn the mind away from greed, from aversion, from delusion, and towards loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. I mean, if you had to choose which of those two sets of characteristics you would like to live in, it's pretty obvious which one you would choose. But sometimes we're so wrapped up in our story or in the story of other people or in a belief system or something that is difficult to see from inside. So it can take somebody from the outside, or it might have to take somebody from the outside to point it out to you. And that's where the values of spiritual friendship and teachers and things like this come into play, to point out what you don't see yourself, from the very, very subtle to the very, very large. And I'm sure most of you have heard this story, maybe not. Um, in short, Anguli Mala was a serial killer at the time of the Buddha. And I laugh just because it just sounds ridiculous to say that. I'm really inspired by this killer. Um, and it's actually a pretty sad story, because the story that we hear in the suttas is only part of the story. And so I want to share with you the backstory. There's a lot of parallels between Angulimala and the Buddha's life. And it's actually said that the Buddha and Angulimala had many, many past lives together. And so this relationship goes back a very, very long time. And so the sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, number 86, is called the Angulimala Sutta. And the backstory is actually in some commentaries, the commentaries that came later. Because Angulimala is sort of known throughout the Asian world, and so there's a lot of stories about him. And so the commentaries kind of give us a window in on what possibly could have caused Angulimala's descent into all this hatred. And I'm going to read to you the story directly from the commentaries. This is actually in this book, which is really great. I'm not sure if we have it at the library there, but it's called Great Disciples of the Buddha. And I think it's really cool, because we hear about these various people who are around the Buddha, but there's Sariputta's in here, and Moggallana, and Mahakassapa, and Ananda, and all these people who accompanied the Buddha along the way, and Angulimala is actually in there as a great disciple of the Buddha, which I think is really interesting. So, and this particular translation and rendering is done by this man named Helmuth Hecker, and I think he does a really good job with it. So I'm just going to read from it and comment throughout, if that's okay. But first, when I was thinking about this, I was also contemplating just various times in my life where I felt so hopeless, where I felt so dark and stuck, and keeping my my presence in this, not getting lost in it. But just think about all those times where I actually thought to myself, like, there's nowhere else to go. What do I do? What do I do? Where do I go? Ajahn Chah is famous for saying, when you can't go forward, and you can't go back, and you can't go left, and you can't go right, and you can't go down, and you can't go up, that's where the Dhamma begins. And I've been there several times in my life. And so I think about this, the title of this talk is No Path is Fixed. Someone said that to me, no path is fixed. I was thinking about if I would have believed them or not. You can begin again. So it's just my lot in life. I was just predestined to be like this. And so the Angulimala story speaks to the immense potential for transformation, even when we feel, especially when we feel most stuck. And also the profound role of forgiveness in that process. And hopefully I'll be able to touch on that. So here we go. I'm going to read quite a bit, but we'll see where this goes. It says, in the Buddhist time, there was a learned Brahmin named Bhagawa Gaga, cool name, Bhagawa Gaga, who served as the royal chaplain in the court of King Pasenadi of Kosala, one of the kingdom's highest offices. One night his wife, Mantani, gave birth to a son. The father cast the boy's horoscope and to his consternation found that his son was born under the robber constellation. Not a good constellation to be born under. Sometimes it's translated as a criminal constellation, indicating that the boy had an innate disposition to a life of crime. One can well imagine what the father must have felt when confronted with that shocking and unexpected revelation. In the morning, the Brahmin went to the palace as usual and asked the king how he had slept. And this is where it gets a little bit fantastical. I like it though. He says, how could I have slept well? Replied the king. I woke up in the night and saw that my auspicious weapons lying at the end of my bed were sparkling brightly. So I was too frightened and perturbed to fall asleep again. Could this mean danger to the kingdom or my life? The Brahmin said, do not have any fear, O king. The same strange phenomena has taken place throughout the city, and it does not concern you. Last night my wife bore me a son, and unfortunately his horoscope has the robber constellation. This must have caused the weapons to sparkle. Will he be a lone robber or the chief of a gang? He will be a loner, Your Majesty. What if we were to kill him now and prevent future misdeeds? Wow. And in the king's wisdom he says, as he would be a loner, teacher, let him be raised and properly educated. Then perhaps he may lose his evil propensities. Right. It's kind of similar to the Buddha. The Buddha was born under a constellation that said that the Buddha was either going to be a great leader or a spiritual teacher. And the Buddha's father did not want him to become a spiritual teacher. So he tried to keep him from anything that would create suffering in his life. So he'd keep him away from thinking there was any need to be a spiritual teacher. Anyway. So what happened was the parents named the child, who will later become Anguli Mala, they named him Ahimsaka. And so if you're familiar with this word ahimsa, sometimes we hear it a lot in yoga and things. Ahimsa means nonviolence. So it basically just means harmless, or the one who is nonviolent, the one who is not violent. And the name was given to him with the hope it would plant in his mind an ideal toward which to strive. When he grew up, he was very, very physically strong and very powerful. It says that he could run down a horse and run down a deer and run down an elephant and tame it. And he was very diligent in his studies and became very, very, very bright and positive. And so they decided to send him off to this really great university to study with this incredible teacher. This university was called Takasila. And he was accepted by the foremost teacher at the university. And he and the teacher hit it off. The teacher really loved him. And he started to kind of mentor him, and became his attendant, and he'd take him to his house, and he would serve him dinner, feed him food. He kind of became part of the family. So all these wonderful things were happening for Ahimsaka. So what the parents were doing was working. It worked. So he's on the right track. But then some of the students, they become very jealous of Ahimsaka. He's getting all the teacher's attention, right? Kind of the teacher's pet. The teacher's pet. Yeah. There's another story I could tell, but I'm going to keep going. Um, and so they plotted against him. So this group of students got together and they said, we need to take this guy down because he's making us look bad. And we can, tell the story of how we've heard that Ahimsaka is going to undermine the teacher. And they were really smart about it. So they broke up into 3 groups because they thought it would take some convincing. So if you're just one big group telling them, of course he's going to brush you off, and then that same group goes back, probably wouldn't be very convincing. So they broke up in 3 different groups. So it sounds like it's coming from 3 different perspectives, points of view. The first group went to the teacher and said, "Some talk is being heard around the house. What is it, my dears? We believe it is about Ahimsaka plotting against you." Hearing this, the teacher became excited and scolded them. "Get away, you miserable lot. Do not try to cause dissension between me and my son." After some time, the second set of pupils spoke to him in a similar way. So also a third group, who added, "If our teacher does not trust us, he may investigate for himself." And so they put it in the teacher's hands. "Why don't you check this out and see?" This is where it gets interesting. I mean, it's all interesting, but this is interesting. Finally, the poisonous seed of suspicion took root in his heart, in the teacher's heart. And he came to believe that Ahimsaka, so strong in body and mind, actually wanted to push him out. This is really important. Once suspicion is roused, one can always find something that seems to confirm it. Once suspicion is roused, one can always find something that seems to confirm it. So the teacher's suspicion grew into conviction. Pretty interesting, huh? This is really interesting because for many, many reasons, and I noticed this within myself, how powerful beliefs are, how powerful they are. This is one of the reasons in the Dharma we look to kind of investigate these beliefs and root out these beliefs and really put them under the microscope. Because even subtle beliefs color our entire world. And so have you ever heard that phrase, somebody told it to me when I was a kid, when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail. When we're living in a life that's constructed on fear, for example, we're going to pick out fear in so many different situations. If we're greedy, we're going to look at the world as a thing that I can get something out of. Constant consumption, trying to get something. If we want to find confirmation, this is called confirmation bias, we will find it for whatever we believe. This is no more evident than in our, what's been happening on the internet, especially during COVID. There's something we believe. The computer's algorithms actually begin to shift to your point of view. So all you begin seeing is things that are constantly confirming you. And every time you're confirmed, you get a little dopamine hit. And so every time you get that little dopamine hit, it becomes an addiction. And so everywhere we look, we see we're confirming ourselves, whether it's positive or negative, no matter what belief we have. So it's really important that we remain really very, very diligent and move towards the wholesome and move towards the skillful. Because if I'm living my life from a base of bodhicitta, of an awakened mind, or from the 4 immeasurables of loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and equanimity, I look out in the world and see those things highlighted. Not that I don't see the other things. It's not like I put on rose-tinted glasses. I see the things. But what stands out, what's my primary focus, becomes nourishing to me rather than constantly feeding into my fear or my aversion or my greed or my hatred. This is so evident of what we're seeing right now with all these divisions. We put people into boxes and categorize them and make a case against them. This is not what the Buddha taught. How many people do we know that have been captured by belief systems? Cults are built on this. And we can do really, really unskillful things under the influence of some of this stuff. And so one of my favorite stories of Ajahn Chah is one that Tanisra tells. And I was talking this morning in the meditation about how having a teacher who studied directly with Ajahn Chah for a long time, you hear all these little stories that you don't hear, like the famous stories. And there was this time where there was Ajahn Sumedho was the Western, the monk in Thailand. He's kind of the high monk in Thailand for the Westerners. And there was this Western nun in one of the monasteries, a really good nun. Like she was really great. People loved her, and she was a great teacher, and people came from all over the world to study with her. And at one point, this sounds crazy, but this is true, she became a Christian. And not just a Christian, but an evangelical Christian. And she didn't stop being a nun. She used her place to start to try to convert her fellow nuns and monks. And this excuse me, this angered Ajahn Sumedho, so much. And he didn't know what to do. But he had kind of decided that they have to kick her out because this just can't happen anymore. This can't happen. And so he went to Ajahn Chah and shared his plans of what he was going to do. And we have this nun who's trying to convert not just all the nuns and the monks, but also the villagers, and holding these services and things. And Tanisra said that Ajahn Chah just looked up and said, "Maybe she's right." And that was it. That was the teaching. And what he was speaking to was how deeply held his beliefs are. If we look at the Heart Sutra, all dharmas are empty. All of it is empty. Maybe she's right. Maybe she's right. I've taken that on as a practice of people I disagree with, or opinions I disdain. Just saying to myself, maybe they're right. And when I do that, there is so much resistance. And that resistance is causing so much suffering. Not because they're actually right, but because I'm so deeply embedded in a particular way of looking at the world. Ajahn Chah was famous for this constantly letting go. Meditation is about letting go in every moment, being okay with what's here in the moment, every single thing. In Buddhism, we're not trying to adopt a set of beliefs and we stick to those beliefs and that's what we do. That's not what it is at all. It's can we let go into our innate humanity, our naturalness, our truly awakened nature. Buddha did not come before awareness, did not come before enlightenment. It was already there. And so we're not adopting a dogma. And this is what that lesson from Ajahn Chah teaches me. Maybe they're right. And if I'm honest, I do the same thing. When it comes to politics or religion or various things, I tend to kind of stick with what I want to be confirmed with because it feels good. And so this is a newer practice for me. And so these classmates got jealous. This was the seed. This was the unethical seed that caused so much damage. The students got jealous. They convinced the teacher. And now the teacher's going to act. So through this one unethical behavior of jealousy, how much did it blossom into something different? Yeah. The other choice is to have sympathetic joy. Sympathetic joy is having joy in somebody else's success or having joy in somebody else's joy. If that was replaced by the jealousy, yeah. Okay, continue. This is definitely going to be a multi-parter. Okay. So once suspicion is roused, one can always find something that seems to confirm it. So the teacher's suspicion grew into conviction. I must kill him or get him killed. Pretty extreme, he thought. But then he considered, it will not be easy to kill such a strong man. Besides, if he is slain while living here as my pupil, it will harm my reputation, and students may no longer come to me. I must think of some other device to get rid of him, as well as punish him. And so this great scholar, he was a scholar, he wasn't a Buddhist teacher, he was a scholar. And so the sila, the ethics are lacking in him, it seems like. It happened that soon afterward, Ahimsaka's course of studies had come to an end and he was preparing to go home. Then the teacher called him and said, My dear Ahimsaka, for one who has completed his studies, it is a duty to give a gift of honor to his teacher. So give it to me. Certainly, master. What shall I give? You must bring me 1,000 human little fingers of the right hand. This will then be your concluding ceremonial homage to the sciences you have learned. Pretty extreme. The teacher probably expected that Ahimsaka, in his attempt to complete the deed, would either be killed himself or would be arrested and executed. Perhaps the teacher may also have secretly cast Ahimsaka's horoscope, seen from it his latent propensity to violence, and now tried to incite it. Faced with such an outrageous demand, Ahimsaka first exclaimed, "Oh, master, how can I do that? My family has never engaged in violence. They are harmless people. Well, if the science does not receive its due ceremonial homage, it will yield no fruit for you." So, after suitable persuasion, Ahimsaka finally consented. After worshipping his teacher, he left. And so the commentaries don't tell us what Ahimsaka, what made him kind of go out and do this. This unquestioning obedience to a guru is very, very influential. Again, when we're really convinced of a belief, we can do really terrible things, as we see throughout the world, throughout history. And so Ahimsaka went out and started doing his thing. He started killing people, taking their little finger of their right hand, putting it on a mala. And so when we give our agency away to a teacher or a belief system or a country or a religion, whatever, humans are capable of some awful, awful, terrible things. So seated within, because he was born under this constellation, seated within Ahimsaka was this propensity for violence. And again, he trusted his teacher so much over the many years, all of the trust, all the meals, all the teaching, all of that everything. I don't know how many years he was with him. Perhaps some of the first few murders were really difficult. The first one was probably really hard. And maybe he stayed up all night and beat himself up, and then He was so committed, he did it again, and he did it again, and it got easier and easier, and eventually it became pleasurable, and the spell was cast. He was under the spell. He was under the spell. This happens throughout human history. I don't really need to bring up all the awful tragedies that have happened at the hands of humans, but it's been since the beginning of time. We as humans are capable of some really, really terrible things. And so when you look at this, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. 1,000 fingers on a mala. So he began to terrorize the area, and it began to be known as Anguli Mala. And so Anguli is finger, and Mala is like beads, the mala beads that we pray on. Anguli Mala, mala of fingers. And so Angulimala went through and continued his killing spree, and all the way to 999. And it said that his mother, this word got out that there was this killer out there, and the king Pasenadi was going to put together an army, and Angulimala was good at killing multiple people at a time. So they would send these bands in, and he would take care of them. And his mother had this intuition that this person was Angulimala, was Ahimsaka, was her son. She hadn't seen him for so long. And so she decides to go and intervene and try to stop Angulimala from continuing his spree. And the Buddha, with his, one morning in his meditation, he was scanning the world, and remember this connection with past lives with Angulimala, he sensed that that Angulimala might commit matricide, kill his own mother. And in the Buddhist cosmology, killing your mother is a really terrible thing. So killing a Buddha, killing your mother, killing your father, those three things are killing an arhat. Those are really terrible and can set you back many, 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 many lifetimes. And so he sensed this, and so he went. And as his mother came towards Ahimsaka, Angulimala, the Buddha showed up. And he was kind of relieved, because he's like, okay, so there's only one here. There's my mother, and there's this other guy. Instead of killing my mother, I'll just kill this monk, and we'll be done with it. It'll be over. And so he started to run towards the Buddha. With the Buddha in his psychic powers, he did this thing where he was walking really slowly, doing his meditative walking. And Angulimala was so fast, he's running, but he's not catching up with the Buddha. And this completely confounded Angulimala. He's like, what's going on? I can run down a horse, I can run down a deer, and I can run down an elephant and tame them, but this mendicant, I can't even chase down. Finally, Angulimala gets really, really frustrated and just starts to scream, "Stop! Stop! Stop, recluse! Stop!" And the Buddha replied, "Angulimala, I have stopped. You stop." Now, this really powerful statement. And these words hit Angulimala like a thunderbolt. Boom! This awakening. Maybe the spell was broken in those words. And confused, he asked the Buddha, like, what do you mean? Like, what's happening? And the Buddha explained, I have stopped harming all living beings. But you have not. You can stop too. And there's more, but let's keep going. And in that moment, Angulimala's mind opened, and he saw the truth of his actions and the possibility of a different path. So it said that he dropped his weapons into this deep crevasse and fell at the Buddha's feet and seeking refuge, seeking help. And the Buddha, in his infinite compassion, welcomed him into the Sangha. Have you ever reached that point where you just give up? Where you see how much suffering, how much stress you're creating in your own life and maybe the lives of others? I've seen that. And there has to be this point where you just give up. This giving up is a beginning again. And this giving up has kind of a bad connotation, but the original meaning of giving up is to offer at an altar. You're giving up. Giving up your attempt to create a concretized place in this world. Giving up your attempt to please others. Giving up your attempt to kind of continue to bolster this ego that only leads to more and more and more and more suffering and pain. You gave up completely. I've been there, for sure, several times. But the Angulimala, his ordination as a monk, this didn't end the challenges that came. And the king finally got together this very large army and said, we're going to find Angulimala and we're going to take him in and try him, whatever, just kill him probably. And so he came. Pasanati was a student of the Buddha and came to the Buddha and the Buddha said, "What are you doing? Are you off to war with one of your other kings?" He said, "No, I'm not. We're looking for this Angulimala." And the Buddha said, what if Angulimala gave up and shaved his head, put on the robe of a mendicant, took up his bowl, and committed to the homeless life? What would you do? And he said, I would praise him, of course. And Buddha said, well, he's sitting right there. He's sitting right there. And it shocked the king. It shocked the king a lot. Because Angulimala was the depictions of him are like this hair that's all matted and all over the place, and he's got fingers, can't forget that, this giant sword, and wearing fur and all this. And here he is, this monk, and he embraced the Dharma and he practiced diligently, and he still faced the consequences of the past villagers because people knew who he was, and so he was abused, and he definitely lived out the karma. I think I want to stop there and continue this story next time. Well, it's up. I'll leave it up to you. Do you want me to finish the story, or do you want to ask questions? You can do this if you want me to continue. Okay, great. I saw 3, so. Okay, so this is really beautiful ending. I'll make it quick. So he'd go down to get his alms food. So every morning, the monks, they would go down to the village, and the villagers feed the monks. They put food in their bowls. They walk through the village. It's this beautiful ceremony, and that's how they eat, because they don't cook. They don't grow food. It's against the vinaya, which is the law, the law of the monks. And people throw things at him and yell at him, and he just takes it. He takes it. I'm trying to find this part in the sutta. Oh, here it is. I think it's right here. Then when it was morning, the Venerable Anguli Mala, dressed and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. Now, on that occasion, someone threw a clod and hit the Venerable Anguli Mala's body. Someone else threw a stick and hit his body. And someone else threw a potsherd and hit his body. Then, with blood running from his cut head, with his bowl broken, and with his outer robe torn, the Venerable Anguli Mala went to the Blessed One. The Blessed One saw him coming in the distance and told him, "Bear it, Brahmin, bear it. You are experiencing here and now the results of deeds because of which you might have been tortured in hell for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years." This reminds me of a quote from a movie called Magnolia. It's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and it says, I forget what's happening in the movie exactly, but they say, "You might be done with the past, but that doesn't mean the past is done with you." And so sometimes we need to bear it, And I think back at all the stupid, unskillful things I've done, and I've had to bear it. Whether it's I'm on a meditation retreat, and that's all that I'm thinking of. Remember one time I was in bed, going to bed at the end of a retreat, and every awful thing I'd ever done in my entire life just kept cycling through my head all night, over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. It happens. This meditation process is a cleansing process. We're being cleansed. Those things are embedded in our bodies, in our minds. And there's this really beautiful part that I'll end on. When it was morning, the Venerable Anguli Mala, dressed and taking his bowl and outer robes, went to Savatthi for alms. As he was wandering for alms from house to house in Savatthi, he saw a certain woman in difficult labor, in painful labor. When he saw this, he thought, "How beings are afflicted! Indeed, how beings are afflicted!" When he had wandered for alms in Savatthi and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and said, "Venerable Sir, in the morning I dressed, and taking my bowl and outer robe, went into Savatthi for alms. As I was wandering for alms from house to house in Savatthi, I saw a certain woman in difficult labor and painful labor. When I saw that, I thought, how beings are afflicted. Indeed, how beings are afflicted. In that case, Angulimala, go into Savatthi and say to that woman, Sister, since I was born, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well." Sort of a strange thing to say. "Venerable Sir, wouldn't I be telling a deliberate lie, for I have intentionally deprived many living beings of life?" Then, Angulimala, go into Savatthi and say to that woman, Sister, since I was born with a noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. And so he goes into Savatthi and says this to the woman. And then the woman and the baby became well, which was a very uncommon thing in those days. Most childbirth ended in death. And so this is the transformation of Angulimala. This thing that's said here, since I was born with a noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived of living beings of life. This is chanted in monasteries all the time in Asia. It's called the Anguli Mala Parita. Parita is a protection chant. And so they chant it. And they chant it over and over and over again, traditionally throughout the Southeast Asian countries, when a baby is being born or when a woman's in labor. They chant this Anguli Mala chant over and over and over again. Sister, since I was born with a noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. And so this sutta ends with this really long poem, but I'll just read a couple of stanzas from it. This is Anguli Mala. Enlightened people often just kind of break out into song throughout all Buddhist lineages. While the Venerable Angulimala was alone in retreat experiencing the bliss of deliverance, he uttered this exclamation: "Who once did live in negligence, and then is negligent no more, he illuminates this world, like the moon freed from a cloud. Who checks the evil deeds he did, by doing wholesome deeds instead, he illuminates the world like the moon freed from a cloud. The youthful bhikkhu who devotes his efforts to the Buddha's teaching, he illuminates this world like the moon freed from a cloud. Let my enemies hear discourse on the Dhamma. Let them be devoted to the Buddha's teaching. Let my enemies wait on those good people who lead others to accept the Dhamma." And so I'll just read the last stanza. "So welcome to that choice of mine, and let it stand. It was not ill made. I have attained the triple knowledge and done all that the Buddha teaches." And so this is a pretty extreme story. The Buddha's forgiveness of this insane murderer. And the Buddha does this a lot, and this often happens in the suttas. There's these really extreme illustrations or the suttas, similes, the word I was looking for. And I think it's to show, like, the Buddha could forgive this guy. Why can't we forgive ourselves for the little things that we do? Why can't we forgive, somebody who looked at me funny? And so I think this story is such an inspiration. I reflect on it often. All the times that I get caught up in just ridiculous things, angry about just insults to my ego, this false self. I'm so occupied by trying to create certainty in that which isn't certain that I just make myself miserable. And so this idea, we're letting go constantly. Every moment is this opportunity to let go. Not to get rid of. We're not starting over. We're beginning again. The difference. We're using the past to inform our present. We use the wisdom that we've learned to make us more compassionate in the moment. It was because Angulimala was so awful that his compassion was so immediate. And so we forgive ourselves. And we use the past to fuel. We use our unskillful behavior. We use our unwholesomeness to fuel our compassionate response to the world. This path of liberation is open to all, without exception. Without exception. This is the story of Angulimala. The worst person you could probably think of was liberated. So when we feel stuck, where do I go? What's my refuge? When things are challenging, what do I do? Let's close out with a aspiration. May I have the courage to stop. May I have the courage to stop. May I have the courage to stop. May I have the patience to begin again. May I forgive myself and others. And may I walk the path of freedom with compassion and grace. May all beings without exception be freed from suffering and the conditions of suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you for your attention.